Good morning to all. On behalf of management and automobile departments, it's a privilege for me to welcome today's speaker, Mr. Mugilan. And I also welcome all the KCG mechanical faculty and students for this webinar. I extend my welcome to all other college faculties, industry experts, and students for this webinar on the topic engine calibration, introduction to mechanical diesel pump calibration. This is the third webinar for us. Before starting the webinar, I like to introduce today's speaker, Mr. Mugilan. Mr. Mugilan did his UG in Velamol Engineering College and PG in College of Engineering, Guindy. As far as experience is concerned, he got 2 years of experience in Standardine Amalgamation Private Limited and 7 years in Caterpillar India Private Limited, Chennai. He worked in various foreign countries like UK and China. He worked in Perkins Engines Limited, UK, Perkins Power System, China. As far as achievement is concerned, he launched close to 31 genset rating application, 12 construction-based machines, and 4 tractor application across global markets for Central Pollution Control Board. He's worked in BS4 and TREM 3A emission sector as well as the non-emission sector. He received the Best Innovation Award 2016 from Analysis Simulation and Test Forum, Asia Pacific. So general instruction to the participants. I request all the participants to mute your Zoom mic, turn off the video. So please post your queries in the chat section relevant to the topic. We will provide the feedback at the end of the webinar in the chat section. Please give the feedback immediately after the session to receive the e-certificate. Thanks in advance for your cooperation. Now I invite Mr. Mugilan to take over the session.
One being mechanical diesel pump calibration. So in a diesel pump calibration, we are choosing very specifically mechanical at this point of time. And inside the mechanical diesel pump, we are specifically choosing rotary and distribution type pumps. Yeah. So welcome to the session. I'm Mugilan Nyanashekaran. So as a quick introduction, we have got engine calibration. What does an engine calibration generally means? Is tuning the fuel, air, and a lot of other variables such that to obtain a maximum performance across the operational range of engines and loads with respect to its prescribed emission limits. So this is just a general outline of what it is. Like an engine when you say like we are going to calibrate an engine, what you are exactly going to calibrate is the fuel and the air mixture, such that you get the emission standards within the prescribed legal limits. And where do you have to calibrate all this fuel and air tuning is across the engine operational speed and its operational load. So by this end of the session, you will have a basic knowledge of what are all the parameters involved in engine calibration with respect to fuel systems optimization. Yeah. So making the introduction quick, we are moving to the agenda. So in this is a quick agenda. It's going to be an introduction to fuel systems initially, and then we are going to discuss about the types of diesel fuel pumps, and then we are going to go through what are all the pump calibration based on the engine requirements, and then we are going to see specifically to rotary sector what are all the various types of operational loads and operational characteristics available with the pump, and how are we going to go about that. And then we have got emission optimization based on diesel fuel pumps. Yeah. So, and then finally we have question answer session, but feel free to ask your question at any point of the time. Yeah. So as a quick introduction to fuel systems, when we say fuel systems, it has got major 3 subsystems in it. One is fuel filters, next one is fuel pumps, and next one is fuel injectors. So when we say fuel filters, as the name says, it's a filter. It's basically a filter. It is going to remove the debris from the fuel, which is your diesel. And really, removing of debris means like, it has got certain specific characteristics for each and every filter. We have got 2 types of filter, basically a primary filter and a secondary filter. Primary filter uses 5 micron and then secondary filter uses 2 micron. So I hope everyone are aware about what is this micron and all. So when we say for the benefit of others, what we are going to discuss now is when you say micron filter, it means anything that is higher than the size of a 5 micron primary filter will not let it pass through it. Yeah, and anything which has got higher than a size of 2 micron, secondary filter will not let it pass through it. And what happen, next question comes as what happens to the debris which are higher than, which are lower than 2 micron and higher than 0 micron. So those are normally let through the filters. And why it is because the whole size of an injector inside of, I mean the fuel injectors are close to 1 to 1.5 micron. So anything that is less than 2 micron can even pass through the injectors. So it is not going to clog your injector and cause heavy damage there. And also we have got some filter mechanisms inside the fuel pump. So we are not, we are not emphasizing greatly on the debris size of less than 2 microns. Yeah. And next one being fuel pump. So fuel pump basic function is to pressurize the fuel and send it to the injectors at the right timing of the engine. So when we, and I have, as you see, like, I have, blocked the important characteristics here and there. So when we say at the right timing, what does it means is it is not, the pump's characteristics is not only about taking the fuel from the tank and delivering it to the engine. It has to give it at the right time. So what is the right time of the engine depends upon your valve timing. So we will discuss those things in the forthcoming slides. Yeah. So when we say fuel and fuel injectors, coming back to the next one is fuel injectors. So fuel injectors basic function is to inject fuel at very high pressure and atomize the fuel into multiple micro droplets for better combustion. Yeah. So when we say, I mean, like, fuel injectors pose a very important parameter in combustion, and it has to split the each and every injection into multiple micro droplets such that the combustion is completely done and there is no debris formed from out of the combustion. So fuel injectors are also equally important. So all these major three subsystems accumulate to form a fuel injection systems. So inside fuel injection system, we are going to concentrate only on diesel fuel pumps today. And when we say diesel fuel pumps, what are all the basic, generic, broader category of pumps we are going to classify it as? There are close to 4 larger types of fuel pumps available. One is unit pump, which is a single cylinder pump, and next one is an inline pump. Third one is rotary or distribution system. Fourth one is a common rail diesel injection system. So when we say unit pump, this is actually an unit pump. This is how it looks like. And if you see here, there is a tappet, there is a roller here, and you have got this is a fuel inlet, this is a fuel outlet. So till this part, the pump gets seated into the engine inside the cylinder. So each and every cylinder has in each and every single pump for each and every cylinder. So say suppose you have got a 6-cylinder engine. So there will be 6 different pumps employed on each and every cylinders. So hence the name single cylinder pump. Yeah. And inline pumps are nothing but all this single cylinder pumps accumulated into a common housing, and then you have a common camshaft for it. So this is called a single inline pump. So these inline pumps are like predominant in areas where like you see tractor sectors and some excavators or small applications uses like this single cylinder pumps as inline pumps as the maximum there. And if you see, the single cylinder pumps are capable of producing close to 300 to 400 bar pressure, fuel pressure, injection pressure. And an inline pump is also capable of producing somewhere around 300 to 500 bar pressure. Yeah. And this pressure plays a major part in these types of the pumps. So the next one being rotary pump. So rotary distribution pump looks like this, and it has got a drive at the back. This drive sits in the engine case, and then you have timing case, timing gears, all these gears coupled together, and then the pump is mounted with an engine. Once this is mounted and the engine starts rotating, these are the fuel outlets that you see. So from here, the fuel gets started to plunge out, and then these fuels are taken to the cylinders as per its firing orders. It's maximum 1432. Yeah. So once the firing order is finalized, if this is the first cylinder outlet, this one will be connected to 1, and this will be connected to 4. And then based on what is the rotation of the engine, it may be clockwise or an anti-clockwise. So based on the rotation, these outlets are connected to their respective injectors. And now this rotary pump is capable of producing a pressure close to 500 to 800 or 900 bar of pressure. And when we spoke about injectors in the last session, last slide, what we mentioned is injector has a major functionality of splitting this into micro droplets for better combustion. So this pressure which is built by the pumps has got a major part in doing that. So when we say, like, it has to split into micro droplets, what is the pressure that is being delivered to the fuel injector is very, very essential. So as I said, single cylinder has got close to 300 to 500 bar. Inline has got close to 300 to 500 again, and rotary has got 500 to 800 bar of pressure. Then the next application came as common rail diesel injection pump. So a common rail diesel injection pump can produce a pressure up to 3000 bar of pressure. So if you see, it is almost like 4 times the pump, pressure that is created by a rotary system. So this pump is not capable of delivering the pressured fuel directly out of it. This will pressurize the fuel in a common rail, and that rail will be built with pressure till 3000 bar. And once the pressure reaches 3000 bar, the injection starts. Yeah, that is how common rail diesel injection pump works. And so that is a quick recap of what is a diesel fuel injection pumps are. And still, if you ask me, like, whether we have only 4 types of pumps, no, we have got different types of pumps, and in each and every pump we have got some more electronic options also included. Like there are many systems inside a pump, and there might be an electronic governor installed in an rotary system. We will remove this cap, and then we'll fit an electronic system, so that this electronic pumps goes to the generators which are fixed in hospitals for the betterment of the people. So based on the application, there are some more electronic parameters are also included in each and every mechanical pumps. Yeah. So now we are going to see what is an engine requirement based pump calibration. Am I going fast? You can stop me if you want in between. So till here, do you have any doubts? Where is the chat section? Yeah. You can feel free to ask me anything.
Okay, Milan sir.
Yeah, cool. So let me continue that then. Yeah, cool. So when we say engine requirement based pump calibration, why is this pump considered as an important thing in an engine? Is because pump is called as the heart of an engine. Engine is basically a dead animal without a pump. That is what a pump manufacturer always says. He brags about his own work. Like, pump is the heart of an engine, and engine is just a dead animal without a pump. So from the pump point of view, when you start a calibration, you will require some of the basic parameters that needs to be provided by the engine manufacturer, such as what is the engine operational speed, and what is the power and load requirement, what is the BSFC requirement. BSFC is brake specific fuel consumption. So what is the BSFC requirement, and what are all the emission requirements that the engine manufacturer is looking for, and what is the number of strokes of the engine, what is the number of cylinders of the engine, all these things. So all these questions are basically put up into an form, and this form is generally shared with the engine manufacturer, and he sits and fills each and everything, and then he will share it back with the pump manufacturer. So this form is called as a questionnaire. So an engine and questionnaire is being provided by the pump manufacturer to the engine manufacturer, and he will fill the form, and then he will send it back to the pump manufacturer, and from there the proto build starts. So there are various phases in a calibration as well. We are not going to just build one pump, fix it in an engine, make it work, and then we'll say yes, the research is success. That is not going to happen. What are all the stages of calibration is? First, we will give first application pump, which is called as FAP. So the first application pump is provided to the engine manufacturer. He will fix it on the engine. He will check whether the parameters are okay. If they are okay, it's fine. If they are not okay, we'll do fine tuning. And once the fine tuning is done and the emissions are met, then comes the consistency batch. We'll give them 3 consistency pumps, and 3 consistency pumps will be tested on 3 different engines. So engine manufacturer has to build 3 engine, pump manufacturer will will build 3 pumps, and these 3 will be tested on each and every engine. And then we will do a matrix test, like 3 engines, 1 pump, and one pump, sorry, 3 pumps on 1 engine, so that we will see whether the pump is also behaving consistently and the engine is also behaving consistently. So once the consistency batch is signed off, we will pull a master pump out of it. And once the master pump is master pump is the reference pump sort of, so this pump will be referred to any problem that occurs in the future. So this pump will be fixed as a master pump, and based on this master pump we will start producing PPAP lot. So when we say PPAP, it is PPAP. It is an acronym basically. So PPAP is pre-production approval process. So we will start with the PPAP production, and PPAP production is a pilot build basically. We will build 15 pumps or like 30 pumps, and then send it to the engine manufacturer. He will test all the 30 pumps, and then he will say whether it is good to go or it's not. And then if it is good to go, then we will do an spec sign off. Once the spec sign off is done and the specification is finalized, then these things are being signed off with the quality team, and quality team takes care of all the customer support and regular updates, all these things then follows on with the quality team. Yeah, so this is actually the pump calibration timeline or a cycle basically. And this takes close to 1.5 years to 1 year, 1 year to 1.5 years it takes very easily for a mechanical diesel injection pump calibration. And for a common rail diesel engine calibration or diesel pump calibration, it takes close to 3 to 4 months, max of 3 to 4 months. That's it. And why there is a vast difference between the time inside a pump? Each and every component has to be changed. You have to change the component. You have to get a new component into it. So that for that you need to actually take the pump back to the factory. You have to disassemble it, assemble it back, again test it, again send it to the field. And it's the same case with the engine as well. But in case of common rail, you have a common ECU there, and you can just toggle the ECU, change few parameters, and then you say yes, this is okay, or no, this is not okay. So generally a common rail calibration is much more simpler than a mechanical fuel injection pump calibration. And still why we are going with the mechanical fuel injection pumps are because one major thing is because of the cost. Yeah, and if you see, common rail pump cost close to 1 lakh or 1.5 lakh on the market, whereas a mechanical fuel pump cost close to 20,000 max, 20,000 or like 30,000 maximum to maximum. Yeah, so because of this vast cost cost reduction that is involved in a pump, and also with the flexibility of the emissions that we are getting. Currently India is in CPCB stage 2, which is Central Pollution Control Board stage 2, and we are at BS 4 for the off highway sector, and BS 6 for the on highway sector, and BS 6 just launched like in the April. And for tractor application, that is for the agriculture side of it, we are still in term 3As, and again BS 3A and BS 4 and with construction based equipments. So we still have time to go till the common rail applications for the off highway sector. So when I say off highway sector, it means like all the engines that are not running on the field that you see, or on the roads. It's not, it is not supposed to run at highway, like a soil compactor or an backhoe loader. You don't normally see a backhoe loader running on the streets, right? You see it very often, I mean very lesser time only, where the machine has to go from one point to another, it goes on. Or an excavator, for example. Excavators are not allowed to run on the roads at all. You are supposed to take the excavator on an trailer, and then you have to move the trailer from one place to another. So these engines are called as, the engines that are equipped in these applications are called as off highway equipments. Yeah, so that is being there. Coming back to the pump calibration, so based on these requirements that are provided from the engine manufacturer, what and pump manufacturer does is, we have to find what is the fuel that is involved in this calibration basically. So to find the fuel, what you do is, we have power in kilowatt that is provided by the engine manufacturer, and BSFC in gram per kilowatt hour that is also provided by the engine manufacturer. So we basically multiply these two, and kilowatt gets cancelled, you get answer in gram per hour. Yeah, So when you see the answer in gram per hour, you divide that by 1000 and get that in kg per hour. So this is nothing but your fuel. So once you have got the fuel value in kg per hour, now what you are going to do is you have to set this fuel value on a pump. And in a pump calibration world, you don't normally measure the fuel based on kg per hour, because it is very smaller value. It'll be something like 0.1 kg per hour or 0.2 kg per hour. So that is very difficult to monitor in a measuring scale or a measuring cylinder. So what we generally do is we convert that to mmq per stroke per cylinder. So when you convert that mmq per stroke per cylinder, it how do you convert that? That comes then. The basically what you do is the kg per hour fuel divided by the speed of the engine into specific gravity of diesel, which is 0.841 normally, and then the number of strokes divided by 2. Why number of strokes divided by 2 is because you have only 2 power strokes in your 4-stroke diesel engine. So we are dividing that by 2, so you get an answer of 2 there, into 60 for the hour conversion, and then into number of cylinders to calculate how many cylinders we have got. So once you do this, you get the value in mmq per stroke per cylinder. So this is the fuel that you are going to spend for creating this much amount of power, for an X amount of power, which has been prescribed by the engine manufacturer. So this fuel which has been spent is called as rated fueling. So rated fueling is nothing but the fuel that has been spent to produce the power that is specified. Yeah. Sorry. So when we say rated fueling is observed, now we are moving to the fuel settings in pump. Yeah. Okay. One second. Sorry. Something came up in the middle. Sorry. Okay. So when we say what is the fuel settings in pump, we have got different settings in a pump. One being the rated setting, next one is a peak torque setting, next one is a light load advanced setting or a light load retard setting, and then we have got governor settings as well. So there are basically 4 major settings in a pump. So these 4 major settings contribute to the continuous operation of a diesel pump. So now with the previous calculation, as I mentioned, with that you have got the rated speed setting. So now we have got what is the fueling to be set at the rated. And to set this one, what we normally do is we'll assemble a fuel pump, and then we'll start the calibration process. We will set there are certain parameters how to set this fuel in the specific RPM zone. So we will set that fuel at the rated point. Once that rated fuel is fixed, then comes the peak torque speed. So as the name says, when you say peak torque, it is the area where the torque is maximum. So this is generally given as 60 to 75% of the rated speed, what is prescribed by the engine manufacturer. So we will normally use the fuel limiters to optimize the curve, and then fuel limiters. 1 second, quickly I'll show you what is a fuel limiter. So you see here these two silver things on the pump. This is called as a fuel limiter. So one is called as a low speed fuel limiter, another one is called as high speed fuel limiter. So we use this fuel limiters to limit the fuel at the particular curve, so that you get the curve properly, and you use that and then get the peak torque speed and peak torque value at the prescribed place. Once after that is done, we'll use the LLA. LLA is light load advance or light load retard setting. Once after the LLA setting is done, finally comes the governor settings. I'm going to explain you each and every setting, what is what and how it is done. Yeah, in the forthcoming slides. So for all these calibrations, we generally use a test bench or test rigs. Basically, we do not use actual engine. Why? Because it is actually very dangerous to do a calibration directly on an engine, because your engine is running at rated RPM, which is coupled with the dynamometer, and it is running with the garden shaft in it. And accidentally, if you touch the garden shaft or if you fall on it, you are dead. That's it. You are straight away dead. It is very dangerous to go inside a test cell when the engine is running. So never attempt to do those things. Safety is first. And again, so what we do as a pump manufacturer is they use test bench or test rigs. And again, using diesel as a fuel in the test rig is also equally dangerous. So we generally don't use diesel there at all, because of the fire point and the flash point it has got. And so what we generally use is a graded oil which is equal to the specific gravity of a diesel. It is called Mahathal, or it has there are various manufacturers who do Mahathal. There are Rockwell, there are Honeywell. All these companies who supply Mahathal oils are there. So we generally top the test rigs with the Mahathal, and then we use the Mahathal oil to test the pumps. And now this is how a test rig looks like. Yeah. So if you see, this is the tester there, and this is the injector setup, and this is your pump which is placed inside this yellow color box. So there is a drive shaft that is connecting the pump, and once the pump starts running, you can monitor using a PC. This starts running, and then it starts delivering fuel to this injectors here, and this is the measuring setup of an injector, and this measures the fuel and gives a feedback to you on the screen. So this is how a test rig looks like. Yeah. Any questions still here? I'm good.
No, sir. No, sir. You can proceed, sir.
If you feel like I'm rushing up, please let me know. Yeah.
Sure, sir.
Okay. Cool. So now going back to the peak torque setting characteristics. So as I said previously, when you say peak torque, it is the place where an engine produces the maximum torque. So when we say, as you all are like, most of them are mechanical engineers and automobile engineers here, and I'm not in a need to explain what is the difference between a power and a torque. So when the load increases, the speed normally drops up. Yeah, it keeps dropping to a point where the torque measured in the curve is peaked at a particular zone. This particular zone of torque peaking is called as a peak torque zone, and government has given a guidelines where it has to actually peak. Yeah, it is considered as 60% to 75% of the rated speed value is the place where the peak torque zone has to occur. Yeah, so assuming 2200 rpm as the rated rpm for this particular engine, and if you substitute 60% of it is 1320 rpm, and a 75% of it is 1650 rpm. So in the next slide, I'm going to show you a model curve for the full fuel pump characteristics from the starting till the end. Yeah, so if you see here, this is a simple curve which has got an fuel versus speed versus fuel curve. So this is basically a fuel curve, and right from the start of the engine, it goes and peaks at 100, and then it keeps dropping to 1000. At 1000 rpm, it keeps dropping to 40 mm³ of fuel, and then it starts ramping up and reaches the peak torque zone. So this is your peak torque point, and then it slowly drops down, and it flats at 2200. So this is your rated point, and then it slowly again drops down in the governor area, and then it zeroes out. So as I mentioned, this is the peak torque point, this is the rated point, and this is the high idle point. Now if you see in the initial, when you initially start the engine, the initial cranking rpm of an engine is basically from 0 rpm to 300 rpm. So at this point, you have to deliver a lot of fuel into the engine such that the engine starts immediately. You do not want your engine to keep dragging and then start late. Yeah, you do not want your engine to crank a couple of times or 3 or 4 times in the morning and then start it. So to aid these functionality of cranking, we have got some more cranking aids such as glow plugs and ether injection. Glow plug is basically an hot iron rod sort of. It has been inserted into the engine on the way of diesel, and so when the diesel touches it, it immediately evaporates. And the glow plug is actually very, very hot, and it glows in red hot condition. It looks like glowing in a red hot condition, hence the name glow plug. So when the fuel touches the glow plug, it immediately evaporates, and then there is a preheat generated inside the combustion chamber, and hence when when the compression happens, the fuel ignites immediately, and then your engine starts. So at this point, you need the fuel to be vaporized very soon, and hence the cranking zone rpm, for a lesser rpm, the fuel is higher. Yeah, and if you see, ether injection is something like, an ether is a highly volatile material, so it can change to vapor very fast. and it can burn very fast since its fire point and flash point are low. So at the start of the engine, at the cranking, when you crank the engine, you will give a single injection of ether, and this ether will immediately evaporate, and then it will burn, and then it will create a preheat inside the combustion chamber, and it will wait for the fuel injection to happen. So once the fuel injection comes in, your fuel will start immediately to burn, and then your engine will start. So your cranking zone is this part till 300 rpm, and then your peak torque zone is here from 1320 to 1650, as I mentioned, and in this area the engine has to peak its performance. So as you see, the engine is at peaking at the fuel, and hence the power directly proportional, and then it will get the power is also higher, and the rated power, and the rated point where, like, your engine max performance or max power output is pulled out at a rated point. And then you have high idle point. High idle point is a point where, like, your engine will go and then it will stop there. It will not die down, it will not produce any useful work. So that point is called as an idling point. We have got two idles basically, high idle and a low idle. So high idle generally happens here, and low idle generally happens at 8000 rpm. Sorry, 800 rpm. Yeah. So with this curve, anyone has got any doubts? No?
No, sir, you can continue.
Okay, cool. Actually, you should have got a doubt, like why there is a drop in this point alone. We could have left it just go like this, but why there is a drop here? Because the lower RPM zones forms an always and bigger issue with respect to mechanical diesel pump calibrations. So when you talk about lower RPM zones, which is like 1200 RPM to 800 RPM, the torque produced by the engine is very, very low. Yeah. So that is because in the lower RPM zone, the smoke produced is very high if you don't dip the curve here. So what we use is we use a low speed fuel limiter. We pull this curve from this point till here. Yeah, we'll drag this curve from it. The curve actually should go like this. Yeah, but what we have done is we have dipped this curve from here till here using the your fuel limiters. Yeah, so that's how it works. So to control the lower RPM zone, we are using this one. Yeah, undo. Cool. Okay. So after all the things that we were talking till now, we are talking about the full throttle performance. That is, assuming we have pulled the throttle to 100% and we are running the engine continuously. But what happens when it comes to part throttle performance? This is very, very interesting area to understand, because we normally do not run an engine at its high performance point at all in its entire lifetime, to say. Even in its entire lifetime, it can go only to a maximum of 1 or 2 times it can touch the higher limit and then come back. That's it. So for a classic example, if you take the UPS that is available inside a house, or a generator that you are using for your apartment, your engine manufacturer will say it can produce an 125 kilowatt of power. Yeah. And what our people will say is it can produce, our electrician normally gives a bandwidth there and he reduces something, and then he will say for a safer limit, he will say it can produce like 115 kilowatt of useful power. And what we generally do is for a 115 kilowatt power, you can employ close to 1000 tube lights or like 2000 fans or something. But still what we will do is we'll reduce the number there, and then we will reduce lesser applications just to safeguard the equipment. So an equipment actually running at its full performance is very, very less in an actual market condition or an actual field. So we for the rest of all the times, it is going to run at the part throttle performance only. So setting up a part throttle performance is very, very important with a mechanical diesel injection pump, or with any diesel engine pumps for that matter. So to understand part throttle performance, we need to first understand how does a valve timing works. Yeah, and what are all the functions of a valve timing diagram. And after that, if you understand valve timing diagram only, then you will know what is an engine firing advance and what is an engine firing retard is called as. If you understand these two parameters well enough, we can skip to the next slide. I mean, next to next, or we'll go through for the next slide quickly, or we'll have a quick recap of the next slide itself. Yeah, that'll be better. So if you see here, this is how an 4-stroke diesel engine valve timing diagram looks like, a classic valve timing diagram. That's it. So this is going to be a quick recap. So if you see, we have got, as you know, like we have got 4 strokes in intake, compression, expansion, and exhaust stroke. We have got 4 strokes basically, and TDC is top dead center of an engine. BDC is a bottom dead center of an engine. So the engine starts from here. It starts to intake. I mean, like the intake valve opens, the air gushes in, and the air gets filled into the cylinder block. The piston keeps moving down, and this air is filled inside the cylinder. And once the air is completely filled, the intake valve closes, and now all your valves are closed, and then the compression starts. So you keep compressing the air, and once you start compressing the air, the temperature increases and the pressure is also increased. It is waiting at a very high pressure and temperature, and then your fuel injection happens here. So once your fuel injection happens, after the fuel injection, immediately the fuel starts burning, and there's a mini blast that happens inside a cylinder. Once the blast gets happened, it expands immediately, and then the expansion stroke continues. So when the expansion stroke continues, we'll open up the exhaust valve, and once the exhaust valve opens up, all the burnt fuel are being pushed out of the engine in exhaust stroke. And then once the exhaust stroke completes, we will close the exhaust valve, and then we will open the intake valve. But here what we do normally, as an ideal engine, we have to close the exhaust valve and then open the intake valve, but all our engines are not ideal engines. So what we do is, we'll open the intake valve before the exhaust valve closes. So this part is called as a scavenging part. So this is a quick recap of what is an valve timing diagram is all about. And our area to concentrate now is this fuel injection part. Yeah. So when we talk about advancing a fuel injection or retarding a fuel injection, what does it means is, advancing a fuel injection is you are opening the valve even before where it is supposed to open. That is, your valve is opening at this point, and your injection is starting to happen at this point, which is like 10 degree here, and it is 15 degree here. So what you normally do is, you will start injecting the fuel even before that's 10 degree. That is called advancing the fuel. Yeah, advancing the fuel injection. And when you say retarding the fuel injection, it is like reducing this value, like 8 degrees or 6 degrees before TDC. If you open, that is called retarding the fuel injection. Yeah, are we clear with this? I hope yes. Cool. So
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
yeah, so quickly moving on to the part throttle performance. Now when we say, like his engine is operating at full capacity, the throttle is not always 100%, so we need part throttle performance as an important one. And the part throttle conditions, the injector characteristics, at part throttle condition, the injection characteristics will change based on the engine load conditions, such that you have to either advance the injection or retard the injection, as I said in the previous image. Yeah. Now the need for complete combustion need to be discussed, right? Why we are doing this advancing and retarding all these things inside an engine is because to achieve complete combustion. Yeah. One, why do you need a complete combustion? That there comes the next question, right? So we will have a quick overview of why we need an complete combustion, and we will have this is going to be very quick. Yeah. So this when we say, like why we need a good combustion, it is for getting a cleaner exhaust emission gases, So when we say emission gases, what are all the real emission gases that we have got? That comes the next question. So we have got nitrogen oxides, we have got hydrocarbons, we have got more carbon monoxide, we have got particulate matters, we have got oxides of sulfur. So why these are considered as harmful gases is because when NOx, where X takes the power of 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so when an NO or an NO2 or an NO3 combines with the atmospheric water vapor, it forms HNO3, which is nitric acid, and this forms the base for the acid rain. And similar thing happens with sulfur as well. So this one combines with H2O in the atmosphere and forms H2SO4, which is sulfuric acid, and again acid rain issue. Then the hydrocarbons causes a lot of lung, I mean, like, a lot of cancer causing agents are available inside hydrocarbons. So it is not allowed. And carbon monoxide generally causes brain dead in humans. And for all the flora and fauna, it is very, very dangerous. So we normally do not encourage engines producing carbon monoxides. And particulate matters. Particulate matters as a is a residue of what is the combustion. Like once the combustion is completed, as we saw on the second slide or something, fuel injectors are supposed to split each and every injection into micro droplets. Yes. And if these micro droplets are not combust completely and only the outer, imagine a micro droplet as a ball. Yeah. Only the outer layer of a ball is burnt and the inside of a ball is not burnt. That is, the fuel is still there. Then what happens is this will get suspended in the air. Yeah. Because of the high temperature that is available outside, it will get suspended. And this suspended particles have got various micron sizes for it. So if it is greater than 2 micron, we are all happy, because your nostrils are capable of trapping all the dust which is greater than 2 microns. And if it is lesser than 2 microns, then comes the real issue. What that is called as, it is respirable suspended particulate matters. It is called RSPM. So this RSPM can get into your nose, it can get into your lungs, and it can go till your bronchitis. And what it can do is it can cause you a lung cancer. So sorry, this RSPM is a very, very highly dangerous substance which is suspended in the air, and people have to control this PM as an immediate action. So our government is enforcing a lot of strict emission norms with respect to engines that has been produced in India, and which has been again marketing, which has been sent to field in India. So we are trying to, as an engine manufacturer or as an research and development engineer, what you do is you try to control this emission parameters that is coming out of the engine. Yeah. And when you say you have to control the emission that is coming out of the engine, you have got two different methods of doing it. One method is you are going to prevent the emission from getting produced in the first place, or it is produced. You have no other go now to live with that. Now what you can do is, you can, after the combustion, you can try to limit the amount of harmful substance that you emit to the atmosphere. So this, after after the combustion process, whatever the harmful gases which are produced, whatever you are trying to remove from the system that has been released to the environment, that is called as an after treatment system. So I hope in the last session which was taken, you are aware about what is an after treatment system is. We have got various systems as SCR, DOC, DPF, and catalytic converters, etc., to control the after treatment, aftermath of what has happened in the combustion. Now we are also seeing about, how can you control the combustion in such a way that it doesn't produce a NOx or it doesn't produce CO. All these are also being considered. Like you can use EGR, you have got external EGR, internal EGR, you can cool the EGR. EGR is exhaust gas recirculation. So all these different types are also there, and to control the combustions. Now, so a part throttle performance is basically needed to get a cleaner emission. Yeah, and this cleaner emission is achieved by advancing the engine or by retarding the engine, such that the injection always happens near to the TDC and the emission is always cleaner. Yeah, so that is the base need of part throttle performance in general. And now if you see, you have achieved the fuel delivering, and then you have advanced the engine, and then you have retarded the engine, and all these parameters are controlled by something called as light load advance. So when we say light load advance or light load retard, it is called, lighter load is part load. Yeah, when you have a part load condition, we are going to advance the engine or we are going to retard the engine. This particular mechanism works so based on there are different pump manufacturers like Bosch, Delphi, Stanadyne, Denso. There are many pump developers, and each and every one of them has got their own method of doing the principle, but the concept is the same. The concept is we are trying to achieve zero emission, and then we are going to use, and for that we need a cleaner combustion, and for the cleaner combustion we are using the light load advance or a light load retard characteristics. So we are not going to dive into that greatly, but this will give you a good idea of what is a light load advance and what is a light load retard. Yeah. And now moving on to the governor characteristics. So when we say governor, it means like, it is going to control the entire fuel pump working. Yeah. You talk about LLA, you talk about LLR, and you want part throttle performance, you want, peak torque characteristics, rated characteristics, whatever it is. When a governor says no for a fuel, it is a no. No, it will directly close the metering valve and say, I'm not going to give you fuel. Yeah. And such is the power of a governor. And what governor does is it prevents the pump from supplying excess fuel, causing the engine to overrun, or from supplying the lesser fuel, causing the engine to die faster. Yeah, it will keep the engine alive, and it will keep the engine within its prescribed limits. It will have its own boundary, and it will keep the engine in that operating boundary itself all the time. So this is called as a governor. And in governor, there are basically two types. One is an all-speed governor, another one is a min-max governor. All-speed governor controls the governing curve across the engine operating condition, like right from the starting till the engine reaches high idle, or the engine shuts down. Till that point, everything is controlled. That is called an all-speed governor. Min-max governor only controls the speed at the initial start of the engine and or at the maximum point of the engine. Other areas you can operate however you want. That is called as a min-max governor. And inside further to the split, we have also called as isochronous governor and synchronous governors. So when you say isochronous governing, where do we need an isochronous governing is, as you everyone, when the load increases, the speed drops. Yeah. But in this isochronous governing, even when the load is zero, the engine stays at 1500 RPM, which is your rated RPM for a genset engine. It will continue to stay at 1500 RPM even when the load is low, 0%, or it will continue to stay at 1500 RPM even when the load is 100%. Yeah, this is an ideal example where this is used. This is maximum used at hospitals or at nuclear power stations and your train traffic controls, air traffic controls. All these area uses this type of generators. So why do they need this one is because there is something called as a frequency for each and every speed that an engine runs. So generally in India we have got 50 hertz as a frequency, which is each and every electrical applications that we have got in our India market has got 50 hertz as the frequency. Like if it can vary from 48 hertz to 52 hertz. If there is anything higher than these two, if there is any disturbance that happens in the current that is flowing, which moves away, which makes the frequency to vary higher than 2 hertz, it will cause the electrical applications to burst. So if you know, when we were in childs, our mothers and grandmothers will ask us to switch off the TV or remove the electrical applications from their power socket when the current goes and if there is a high thunder or lightning that is happening. It has got a reason to it, because when there is a immediate lightning or a thunder, the power surge happens to the electrical units. And previously in those days, we did not have such a big electrical grid to transmit that amount of energy to the ground. So that energy gets carried away into the regular household electric wires, and that causes the electrical applications to fail. Our TVs will fail, or all our electrical appliances in the house will fail. So that is one of the reason why all your mothers and grandmothers asked you to remove the plug from the sockets. It has got a good reason to it. And so if there is, and coming back again here, when there is so in general, when there is an power fluctuation, the frequency changes, and when there is a frequency change, the speed changes, and when the speed changes, the load parameter changes. And when there is a load change, if you are doing an operation and in the middle of an operation, if the load changes, it might be very, very fatal. Yeah. So an isochronous governor is employed to control all these parameters and make the engine run at a constant speed, which is 1500 RPM. Yeah. Cool. So we have also got min-max governor there, which is it can control at minimum point and maximum point. Rest of the operating zones, it's free. This governor is generally employed on highway equipments. On off highway equipments, we don't generally employ these things. Yeah. And yeah. And so now I'll give you a basic example of a governor curve looks like. So if you see here, this is a basic governor curve. Again, a fuel is a speed curve. So the fuel as the speed increases, the fuel gradually drops and keeps gradually dropping, and then it drops constantly, and at a point, and at 2420 rpm, which is your 10% of the rated speed, you have your governor point set, which is your high idle speed. So the engine is set at high idle, and then if the speed overshoots than high idle, it will gradually drop down and then it will dive the engine. Yeah. Now talking about idle, at this point the engine is not going to produce any useful amount of work, or it is not going to give you any uh, or torque or anything. It is just going to keep the engine alive, such that it is going to overcome its own frictions, like all the frictional loss it has got, like with the piston cylinder or with the gear movements, all with the hydraulics, all these things are accounted, and it is always controlled in that point where there is no useful amount of work is produced, but the engine is still alive. That point is called as idling points. Yeah. So high idle is set here. Cool. So emission optimization basics. So when we say emission optimization, as we discussed in the previous all this slides, when we say this pump characteristics has got much effect on engine characteristics. So what we can do is we have to optimize the emission between a pump and an engine. Why it is always to be an optimized thing is because when you say optimization, it is not like you are controlling directly. You are trying to control such that it is not going to affect the other parameters. It is basically a trade-off always. That is, as I said previously, we have got NOx, HC, and PM and all. So when your NOx increases, your PM level will drop, and your when your HC increases, your PM will also go up. So this is always like if you increase the NOx, it will decrease the HC and CO and PM, and if you decrease the NOx, this one will go out. And to achieve a certain point where all these three are found in an equilibrium position such that it passes the emission legislation, that is the work of an emission optimization engineer and a performance engineer. So that is what we do generally inside the factories. Yeah. Now to see why does this NOx forms in the first place is because when the combustion is too much, when there is too much of combustion and the temperature shoots up very fast, the nitrogen is normally available as N2, right? And this N2 gets split into two. They form nitrogen ions. They have N triple bond N, and this triple bond gets break down, and then it forms a very high affinity nitrogen atoms, and these atoms pull the oxygen very fast, and then they form NOx. That is NO2 or NO3 or NO. So this is a bigger problem when there is a higher temperature. Yeah. And HC and CO forms as a part of your incomplete combustion, or when there is lesser availability of air, or when there is a lesser availability of fuel, you get this HC and CO. HC and CO normally gets increased. And partial combustion is a bigger issue with this PM. As I said previously, when the injector atomizes it poorly, or there is lesser fuel injection pressure, then this problem will be predominant with this PM increase. Yeah. So if you see, normally what we do is this engine cranking angle has got a serious effect on injection pressure, no, and then in cylinder pressure, sorry, and this injection timing has got a serious effect on NOx and soot. Soot is nothing but your PM. Yeah. Now we are trying to understand what happens which one goes up or which one comes down. So if you take this graph, it is basically a P theta diagram, and in this one, what you see is this is a pressure versus crank angle. Your pressure keeps on increasing, and then it shoots up to the max when the engine is at 20 degree before TDC. When the injection is happening 20 degree before TDC, the pressure is at max. So if you keep on retarding the engine, so like 16 degree, 12 degree, 8 degree, 4, and then it comes at TDC. So if you see, as you retard the engine, the injection in cylinder pressure keeps dropping. Yeah. That is because you are giving lesser amount of time for the engine to burn the fuel. Yeah. And if you see, when you are giving lesser amount of time for the engine to burn the fuel, that means you are not giving enough time for the entire fuel to burn completely. So when that happens, the PM keeps on increasing here. Yeah, in this graph. And if you see and sorry, the NOx keeps on increasing, and the soot keep on increasing when there's oh, I read the other way, sorry. So when the injection timing keeps on decreasing, the soot keeps increasing like this. Yeah. So at 20-degree VTDC, you see, like, at 20-degree the soot is minimum. Yeah. At TDC point, at TDC 0-degree, the soot is at maximum. Yeah. And this, and vice versa for the, and it's the other way around. It's the inverse way for the NOx. The NOx keeps on increasing when there is a heavily advanced timing. When there is a retard timing, the NOx decreases. So what we will generally try to find is, we will try to find this equilibrium point, and you will produce close to 10,000 engines, or like a lakh engines for this particular rating, and all your 1 lakh engines has to fall into this place, okay, of the emissions. So that is what we control as an performance engineers sitting inside a factory. Yeah. Any questions still here? Cool. If there is anything, just drop it in the chat area.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
And now we saw all these things with respect to a mechanical fuel injection system. And now what we will next think is, okay, why do we have to always have this much amount of hassle with each and every mechanical pump that we are generating? And why is this hassle is been in the first place for us as a predominant source of issue? Is because the mechanical pumps normally give the entire main injection as a single injection. It is a single injection phenomena. Like, the pressure increases, it injects, and then it closes. That's it. It's done. But in a common rail diesel injection, what it can do is, it can split one injection into multiple shots. Like, to be precise, like, we have got close to 5 to 7 shots it can split us. We generally call it as pre-pilot, pilot, main injection, post, and afterburn. So a single injection, this single injection can be split into minor injections and given at various locations as and how you want. Like, at 5-degree crank angle, you can give 25% of the fuel, and at 15-degree crank angle, you can give 75% of the fuel. And at this point, which is like, for a 10-degree crank angle, you can just keep it idle. You need not have to even inject anything. Now, these flexibility of injections are available with CRDI system. And so when you give this flexibility, your heat release curve looks entirely different. So if you see here, the initial heat release curve is this one. So this is the peak. It goes till the peak, and then it comes here, it drops down, and then slopes out. So this is your single injection curve. And whereas if you see, the reduction in the heat release because of split in the injection is from 180 to around 180 to 120. So it is close to 600 joules per degree. We are reducing the 60 joules per degree. We are reducing the heat release. So this heat release is a major parameter for your NOx production. So when your NOx production comes down, you will have a better flexibility of increasing this HC and CO, and partially increasing the PM, and then you can reduce the rest of the things with after treatments. Yeah. So this is one of the major advancement of this CRDI injection. So as with this, we are closing the mechanical rotary fuel injection systems. Now I think you will have a good basic of how a mechanical fuel rotary injection system is being calibrated. We have got basically rated, peak torque, we have got LLA, LLR, and then governor. All these characteristic settings change based on each and every pump manufacturer, and then then the development keeps on continuing as consistency phase, and then PPAP, and then pilot build. Like this way, it keeps on going. And the current advancement is the CRDA injection. So sometimes in the future, we will try to see how a CRDA works, and how an ECM functions. What are all the maps and tunes? How we calibrate the maps and tunes inside each ECM? What is a map first of all? What is a tune first of all? All these things we will see when we take something related to CRDA injections in the future. Yeah. Thank you. If you have got any questions, just let me know. I'm trying to open the chat session. Yeah, again, as people have asked, I'll put this PPT. I'll share the PPT with Motilal sir or with Madhavan so that they can, share with the guys. Yeah. Excavator is operated by hydraulics. Does operated constant speed close to max lead and all the time load? No, actually, there is a question from Bhaskaran ME. So there is a question stating that in CAT excavators operated by hydraulics, does the engine operated at constant speed all the time? No, it is. CAT excavators have got basically two modes of operation. One is called as a tortoise mode, another one is called as a rabbit mode. In a tortoise mode, the engine operates very slow, like it goes like a tortoise, and the rabbit mode is for a quick movement. And when it comes to trenching operation, when it when it actually performs the job of taking the mud out and then throwing it to the other places, the engine RPM keeps on varying based on the load that it picks up. Okay. And with respect to CAT machines, the hydraulics are operated based on a hydraulic pump separately, and this hydraulic pump is controlled by a separate hydraulic chamber and then a separate hydraulic and that hydraulics is itself a complete different bundle. Yeah. And that bundle supplies the it has got various valves for boom rise, boom down, left, right, all these things it has got. And those movements are controlled by a subsidiary part of this engine. So what happens is the load from the engine is shared to the hydraulics part when the engine is operating to pull the load out. Yeah. So the engine does not operate always at constant speed. It varies based on the this one based on the load. It's a quick answer for you, Bhaskaran. Yeah. Can we control the NOx, HC, and CO of the fuel injection without the help of any other emission control system? I mean, the golden ratio of fuel to air. Actually, if you see, without the help of other emission control systems, we were been controlling the emissions. To answer KR Dhanush, yeah. So we have been controlling the emissions, but what has happened is with CPCB stage 1 we did not employ any after treatment systems like SCR or DOC or DPF. And once the emission standards got more and more stringent, and this stringent emission norms comes from air quality analysis, then it's called source approachment studies, whereas all this IITs does the studies on like 2 years once or 5 years once, and they release an statement. And when the last statement rolled out, it said 11 cities across India is identified as the major area where this air quality is going down. And to control that air quality there, they in turn ARA, which is Automotive Research Association of India, joined with this, which is a part of this Internal Affairs Ministry. They came to a conclusion we will up the emission norms across India. And if you see in Delhi, Noida, and Nagpur, Chennai, and all, we are not supposed to run BS3 engines for the past 5-10 years now. No, but no one bothered it. So government tried to implement only a city-based control for this air quality control. And since that did not work out greatly, we have increased the entire India norms. We have revised the entire India norms, and we have pulled everyone up to the BS6 standard now for on-highway sector, and BS4 for the off-highway sector. And to answer you, yes, we were been controlling this. And since the emission norms have gone very stringent, and people are not yet readily willing to put much money on the market, what they normally do is we are trying to employ this after treatment systems and then use the same pump with the same characteristics, and such that we get reduced cost for the engine as well. It's a win-win for both, for the people as well as the manufacturer. That is why we are not able to do that emission control systems without any other help. Yeah. So recent development, Susinder R has asked a quick question what is the recent development that is happening in the engine? Problems found in recent developments. So as you all know, like we are slowly moving towards the electronic sector. We are moving towards electric fuel, and storage of these electric fuel is one of the biggest issue that we are facing. And electrical gas stations, like what we have currently as a petrol pump station or a diesel pump station, we have to employ a lot of electrical stations. And for that electrical stations, you need a grid which can control the electricity that an electrical station holds. And to produce that grid, we have a lot of money to be invested. So this actually pulls up the cost to a higher level. And we are working on to reduce the higher level of this cost involved in this electrical areas by inventing a new technology called graphene technology. So currently people are working on across the globe to reduce, to reduce the cost involved with storage of this power using graphene. So that research is still going on. It is still very very crude to talk about that, but still people are working on something which is an greater issue at this point of time. Thank you. Yes, of course. Kishore Kumar has asked a question like whether mechanical pump is capable of meeting BS6 norms. Yes, it does. We can meet BS6 norms, but it depends on the range of the pump. Like if you say from 0 to 19 kilowatt, it can reach. But with respect to 19 to 504 kilowatts, it cannot. No, it basically depends on the range of the pump and the operational condition of the application where we are going to use. If you are going to employ that in an smaller lawn mower, or if you see the Bobcat machine that is running in Chennai municipality, right? Like where it's a small kind of an wheel skidder where they take the garbages and put it inside the truck. So those kind of emission machines, we can still meet the BS6 norms. But when you go for higher wheel loader applications, or a small wheel loader, or a compact wheel loader, or a motor grader, all these machines are still they cannot meet BS6 applications. Thank you, Kishore. Thank you. Ashwin has asked, sir, why is the peak torque is between 60 to 75% of the engine RPM? That is, so if you see, it is basically a government norms, and government did not keep that blindly. And there is a reason, good reason behind it. If you see, 60 to 75% of the engine RPM is the point where your engine starts stalling up. And if you are going to control the torque that is produced at that point, and if you are going to peak the performance at that point, your engine is capable of producing much higher power. Okay, so and it is capable of producing much cleaner emissions at 60 to 75% of the engine RPM. So just for the emission sake, we are trying to build all these outside sectors so that it is contained in a very strong fashion, so that we don't fail the emissions. That is the reason why we have 60 to 75% of the engine RPM. Thanks, Ashwin. Vishnu has asked which is the best, electric vehicle or an IC engine vehicle. So as an IC engineer, if you see electrical vehicles, we are not still sure. We are always welcome to the technology, and electrical vehicles are not, we are not really sure, whether it can start pulling in load or not, like a tractor, like what a regular tractor and a trailer does in the field, whether an electrical vehicle is capable of doing all those load applications, high load applications. So we are still working on it. It is very crude to talk about it now, Vishnu. Is there any scope of advanced combustion strategies like RCCI, PCCI, or hybrid of advancement and conventional combustions? Yes, actually. With RCCIs and HCCI or with PCCIs, we were been trying all these regions. We are trying to, ultimately we are trying to reduce the emissions, and then we are trying to control the combustion. And with the current advancement, what we did is, we have stopped all this production and we have moved to a very much sustainable energy, which is renewable as well. So with the introduction of electric vehicles, yeah. So these things are not going to be on complete halt, but they have their own scope of work. Yeah, that's all at this point of time, Gautam. system to control the emission. Yes, with Purushothaman asked, like, is there any air quality system to control the emission? Air quality system to control the emission is like, it's not something like you employ a machine and then you control it. It's basically a study that is done by the IITs. They say like, yes, the city has got an bad air quality or a good air quality, and out of that the government decides whether to go to continue with that or to stop that one. Yeah, and can control the emission by modifying the fuel characteristics inside the engine before the after treatment. Yes, of course. Vignesh has asked a question like, can we control the emissions even before the after treatment processes? Yes, we can do that. I mean, that is what is called as an internal EGR. Yeah, an internal EGR controls the NOx. Basically, what it does is it will not allow the exhaust gas to walk away directly out of the cylinder. It will trap some of the gases inside the cylinder itself, such that the trapped exhaust gas does not have oxygen in it. So, because the oxygen was used by the last combustion itself, so this available gas without the oxygen gas will stop the inflow of air, which has got fresh oxygen in it. And since lot of oxygen did not come through inside, our engine will stall and the performance will get reduced, and the temperature which is going to shoot up will reduce. And when the temperature shoot up is going to reduce, your NOx production will be reduced. Yeah, and there are a lot of other parameters also we do to control this one, like if you say external EGR is also there, and we have got air coolers and all employed in the interchange. I mean, in the intercoolers, there are a lot of developments that is happening to control how to control, like, without emissions without employing after treatment systems. So those are also there. Actually, like, Basan, there is the next question which says, like, with HCCA, RCCA combustions, which one do you prefer? No, the basic problem with HCCA and RCCA is it is again costly. Yeah. And it is complex. It's way too much complex. And instead of employing way too much complexity, I can directly put CRDA injection there, right? And when you say, when there is a marketing decision that is made, I mean, like, if you ask us an R&D engineer to me, yes, we can do that. That will be my straight answer. Yes, we can employ HCCA combustion on RCCA combustion mode, and then control NOx and PM, and then we can get this engine working greatly. But if you say on a long run, there is something called as a life of an engine. They have something called as a B10 life or a B20 life for an engine. And when this B10 life comes into play, then this HCCA and RCCA, we have not validated it so much. But whereas electrical vehicles, we have already validated it. When there is a validated good product available and you are trying completely new something which is not going to be as good as the existing product, then it doesn't make sense. So that is the reason why, the entire globe is moving towards electrical vehicles. Is only affect the performance of the vehicle. Vishnu has a question like, does BS6 emission norms really affect the performance of the vehicle? No, performance and emission, these two are two different parameters, Vishnu. So if you see, if you are concentrating on the performance, you should be ready to spend money. And if you want better emission, you should also be ready to spend money. Yeah. And when we say performance of the vehicle, say suppose your regular car, which is for example Baleno, it can deliver like 84 PS of power or 84 kilowatt of power, and with respect to emission front, it can give you BS6 emission norms. But on the other hand, if you see the previous developments from Maruti for the same 1.2 liter engine, it was developing close to 92 kilowatts of power, and there is a power reduction now, and which is being compensated with an emission upgradation. Yeah, so that it is always a trade-off between a performance and an emission. That is why we call it as an performance and emission optimization. It is we are trying to optimize it and fix something which is useful for everyone. Yeah, reduces fuel, consumes more fuel. How to manage this issue? I'll share this in short. Yeah, cool. So if there is anything else, you can keep dropping in. You can see. Godwin have a question like retarding the injection timing reduces fuel NOx lowering the peak temperature. This consumes more fuel. If you reduce the injection, if you retard the injection timing, and your NOx reduces, and your PM shoots up, and your CO shoots up. So you have to always take care of PM as well, because in CPCB stage 1, the PM limit was 2 gram per hour, kilowatt hour. And in CPCB stage 2, which was released like 2 years back, the emission norms for PM went from 2 gram per kilowatt hour to 0.2 gram per kilowatt hour for engineering target, or like 0.4 gram per kilowatt hour for the whole sector target. So when there is close to like 90% of the target reduction, and you are completely concentrating on how to better this engine with this existing technology, all these thoughts comes into the play. What we normally do is we generally change the combustion bowl characteristics. Yeah, to answer you straight, if you play with the combustion bowl characteristics or the injector spray cone angles or the injector capillarity, there is something called as a K factor in an injector. Yeah, and if you play along with these things, you will be able to get this issue sorted. Yeah, cool. Sorry, we have overrun close to 15 minutes or 20 minutes. We have overrun. Yeah, if there is anything else, please let me know. Or it was great talking to you guys.
So thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Thank you, Mugilan, sir. You can stop the screen now.
Yeah, 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 cool. Yeah. Okay, sir. I'll take off here.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, everyone.
But sir, be here itself. Okay, be in the webinar itself. Okay.
Yeah, cool.
So Madhav said it's audible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So really, the session was an informative one. So I request all the participants kindly spare some few minutes. The feedback link will be shared shortly in a chat section. Kindly fill the feedback, give the exact feedback. Okay, now I request our mechanical, that is our automobile faculty, Mr. Madhavan, to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir. So very good afternoon to everyone, and it's my privilege to give the vote of thanks. First, myself on behalf of Automobile Department, thanks to our management for giving the permission to conduct today's webinar, and my sincere thanks to Principal Dr. G. Prabhakaran sir, and Associate Dean Dr. Devasundari Madam, and Dr. Motilal, Professor and Head of the Department, giving their extended support to conduct this webinar. And on behalf of today's participants and the KSG College of Technology, a very special thanks to today dynamic resource person, Mr. Mugilan, is a Senior Associate Engineer, Caterpillar. Sir, we enjoyed a lot and learning a lot, sir. And on behalf of Automobile Department, heartily thanks to today's participants. And we hope enjoy the today's session, and we are sure it should be continued in our auto webinar series. So thanks to everyone. Then I'll share the feedback link.